What happens after death? Buddhism's view on rebirth and karma. Part 1. The nature of death in Buddhism. In Buddhism, death is not seen as an end, but as a moment of transition. It is a change, like the setting of the sun to give way to the night, or the falling of a leaf to make room for new growth. The Buddha taught that life is a continuous flow, not a fixed point. This understanding is deeply rooted in the teachings of impermanence, non-self, and the interconnected nature of existence. Impermanence, or anicca, is one of the central teachings in Buddhism. The Buddha repeatedly reminded his disciples of this truth. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Everything that arises must pass away. Our bodies, our possessions, our relationships, and even our thoughts are subject to change. Death, in this light, is simply another aspect of impermanence. It is a natural part of the process of existence. Recognizing impermanence helps us to see that clinging to anything, whether it is life itself or the people and things we love, leads to suffering. By accepting the truth of impermanence, we prepare ourselves to face death with understanding and peace. The concept of non-self, or anatta, further deepens this understanding. The Buddha taught that what we think of as the self is a combination of ever-changing physical and mental elements. There is no permanent, unchanging essence within us. Death, then, does not mean the end of a self, because such a self does not truly exist. As the Buddha said, just as a chariot is made up of parts and does not exist as an independent entity, so too is the body and mind a collection of elements. When we grasp this truth, we can let go of the fear of losing something that was never truly ours to begin with. In Buddhism, death is not viewed with dread or finality. Instead, it is seen as a moment of transition within samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This cycle is propelled by karma, the actions we perform with intention. The Buddha explained that our thoughts, words, and deeds create seeds that will bear fruit in this life or future lives. Death is the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, shaped by the karma we have accumulated. The teachings encourage us to prepare for death, not by fearing it, but by living in alignment with ethical principles and cultivating a mind of clarity and compassion. When the Buddha was asked about the most important practice for preparing for death, he replied, "Mindfulness of death, developed and frequently practiced, brings great benefit and leads to liberation." Mindfulness of death involves reflecting on the reality that life is finite. This practice does not create anxiety, but rather instills a sense of urgency to live meaningfully and make wholesome choices. Understanding death as a transition rather than an ending allows us to approach it with wisdom and equanimity. It reminds us to live fully in the present moment, to act with kindness and integrity, and to let go of attachments that bind us to suffering. The Buddha's words echo timelessly. Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This teaching is not only a guide for life, but also a preparation for death, encouraging us to live with awareness and die with peace. Part 2. Rebirth, the continuity of consciousness. In Buddhism, the idea of rebirth explains what happens after death. It is important to understand that rebirth does not mean the transfer of a soul or an unchanging essence from one body to another. Instead, it refers to the continuity of consciousness, a stream that flows from one life to the next, shaped by karma. The Buddha described it as one flame lighting another. The new flame is not the same as the old, yet it arises because of it. The Buddha was very clear in teaching that what is reborn is not a fixed entity. He said, "Consciousness arises dependent on conditions. When those conditions cease, consciousness ceases." This means that consciousness is not a self or a soul. It is a process, dependent on causes and conditions. At the moment of death, this stream of consciousness does not vanish. Instead, it takes a new form, influenced by the actions, intentions, and mental states that have accumulated during a person's life. Rebirth occurs within the framework of dependent origination, or paticca samuppada. This teaching explains that all phenomena arise due to specific conditions and cease when those conditions are no longer present. It is through this chain of causation that the cycle of samsara is maintained. The 12 links of dependent origination describe how ignorance and craving lead to birth and death, creating the conditions for rebirth. By understanding this process, one can begin to break free from the cycle. The realms of rebirth are often described as 6: the heavenly realm, the human realm, the realm of asuras, demigods, the animal realm, the realm of hungry ghosts, pretas, and the hellish realms. These realms are not places in the physical sense, but states of existence shaped by karma. For instance, virtuous actions and a mind of generosity and compassion may lead to a heavenly rebirth, while actions driven by anger and cruelty may result in a hellish state. The human realm is considered particularly precious because it offers the opportunity to practice the Dharma and work toward liberation. The Buddha emphasized that rebirth is not a matter of chance. It is governed by the law of karma, which operates with precision. He explained, "Beings are the owners of their actions, the heirs of their actions. Actions are the womb, the relative, and the refuge of beings. Whatever actions they perform, wholesome or unwholesome, they will inherit those." This means that the quality of one's rebirth is directly linked to the ethical and mental qualities cultivated in life. While the idea of rebirth might seem complex, it ultimately underscores the importance of our actions here and now. The present moment is where we plant the seeds for the future. By living ethically, cultivating a mind of kindness and clarity, and letting go of harmful attachments, we can shape a favorable rebirth. More importantly, we can move closer to the ultimate goal of liberation from the cycle altogether. The Buddha taught that understanding rebirth is not just about what happens after death, but also about how we live. When we recognize that our actions have far-reaching consequences, we naturally strive to act in ways that bring benefit rather than harm. As he wisely said, "Just as the shadow follows the body, so too does the result of our actions follow us." This teaching reminds us to live with awareness, knowing that our thoughts, words, and deeds create the conditions for what comes next. Rebirth, then, is not something to be feared but understood. It is a reflection of the law of cause and effect, offering us the opportunity to learn, grow, and ultimately transcend the cycle of samsara. Part 3. Karma, the law that governs rebirth. Karma is a foundational concept in Buddhism, a principle so deeply woven into the teachings of the Buddha that it shapes the understanding of life, death, and rebirth. Often misunderstood as a simplistic idea of reward and punishment, karma is, in reality, a complex and profound truth that reflects the moral and spiritual law of cause and effect. The Buddha described karma succinctly. By oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is good done. By oneself is one purified. Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. Karma, as taught by the Buddha, refers to intentional actions, thoughts, words, and deeds that arise from the mind. These actions leave imprints or seeds on the stream of consciousness, which will bear fruit when conditions ripen. It is essential to understand that karma is not fate or predestination. Instead, it is dynamic and ever-changing, shaped by our ongoing choices and intentions. In the Buddha's words, "It is volition, monks, that I call karma. For having willed, one acts by body, speech, and mind." The distinction between wholesome and unwholesome actions is central to the understanding of karma. Wholesome actions, those rooted in generosity, compassion, and wisdom, lead to positive outcomes, while unwholesome actions, those driven by greed, hatred, and delusion, result in suffering. The Buddha likened this to planting seeds. If you sow a seed of sweet fruit, you will reap sweet fruit. If you sow a seed of bitter fruit, you will reap bitter fruit. The role of intention, or sadhana, is the heart of karma. Two individuals might perform the same act outwardly, but their karmic results could differ greatly depending on their motivations. For example, giving to others with a pure heart generates powerful, wholesome karma, while giving for selfish recognition diminishes the positive impact. The Buddha highlighted this by saying, "What we think, we become. With our thoughts, we make the world." Karma not only influences this life, but also shapes the conditions of future rebirths. It determines the realm into which one is born, whether as a human, an animal, or in a heavenly or hellish state. Yet karma is not a fixed, deterministic force. The Buddha emphasized that we have the power to change our karma through mindfulness, ethical living, and spiritual practice. He reassured his followers, even if one has done evil in the past, if one makes effort to purify the mind and live virtuously, one shines like the moon freed from clouds. The law of karma reminds us of our responsibility for our own lives. It urges us to live with awareness, knowing that every thought, word, and deed has consequences. It also inspires hope, for it teaches that through effort and wisdom, we can transform our circumstances. This understanding is liberating, as it places the power for change firmly within our hands. Ultimately, the purpose of reflecting on karma is not to become entangled in thoughts of reward or punishment, but to awaken a deeper understanding of the interconnected nature of life. Karma teaches us that our actions ripple outward, influencing not only our future, but also the lives of others. As the Buddha said, just as a drop of water can raise the level of a full pot, so too can small acts of goodness accumulate and bring great benefit. By understanding and practicing the principles of karma, we align ourselves with the natural law of cause and effect. We cultivate the seeds of wisdom and compassion, paving the way for a life of peace and a future of liberation. This teaching is not abstract or distant. It is an invitation to live with integrity and purpose in the here and now. Part 4. Liberation from the Cycle of Rebirth. At the heart of the Buddha's teachings lies a profound aspiration: liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, known as samsara. This cycle, driven by ignorance and craving, is marked by suffering. The Buddha's awakening revealed a path to transcend this endless cycle, offering a vision of freedom, peace, and ultimate truth. Nirvana, the ultimate goal in Buddhism, is not a place or a state of existence. It is the cessation of suffering and the extinguishing of the causes that fuel samsara, ignorance, craving, and aversion. The Buddha described it as the unconditioned and the deathless, a state where the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion are extinguished. He said, "There is, monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, uncompounded. If there were not this unborn, unbecome, unmade, uncompounded, there could not be the escape from what is born, become, made, and compounded." The path to liberation is the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical guide that encompasses ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. It is through this path that one weakens the forces of karma and breaks free from the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha emphasized the transformative power of this path, saying, "Just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so too does my teaching have one taste, the taste of liberation." Ethical conduct, or sila, forms the foundation of the path. By living with integrity, avoiding harm, speaking truthfully, and acting with kindness, we create the conditions for inner peace and clarity. The Buddha often reminded his disciples, "Happiness follows the virtuous like a shadow that never departs." Mental discipline, cultivated through mindfulness and concentration, allows us to see reality as it truly is. The practice of meditation calms the mind, sharpens awareness, and uncovers the deep truths of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. The Buddha encouraged his followers to persist in their practice, saying, "Meditate, monks. Do not delay, lest you later regret it." Wisdom, the crown of the path, arises from direct insight into the nature of reality. This wisdom dispels ignorance, the root cause of samsara. It reveals the interconnectedness of all things and the emptiness of inherent existence. The Buddha described this awakening as seeing the world as it really is, free from distortion and delusion. The journey to liberation is not an easy one. It requires dedication, effort, and a willingness to let go of attachments. But the Buddha assured his followers that liberation is possible for anyone who walks the path with sincerity. He said, "The awakened one is the one who perseveres. Even a drop of water, falling persistently, can wear away the hardest rock." The teachings also offer numerous examples of individuals who attained liberation, serving as inspiration and guidance. In the Pali Canon, stories of arahants, the enlightened ones, illustrate the profound transformation that occurs when one breaks free from samsara. These stories remind us that the goal is attainable, not just for monks or scholars, but for anyone who earnestly applies the teachings. Liberation from samsara is not about escaping life, but about fully understanding it. It is the ultimate freedom, where one no longer clings to illusions or suffers the consequences of ignorance. The Buddha's words resonate timelessly. There is no fire like passion, no crime like hatred, no sorrow like separation, no happiness like peace. This peace, found in nirvana, is the fulfillment of the Buddha's vision, a life beyond suffering, a mind beyond delusion, and a heart at rest in the truth. Part 5. Preparing for Death, Buddhist Practices. In Buddhist teachings, death is not seen as an isolated event, but as a culmination of how one has lived. The Buddha often emphasized the importance of living mindfully and ethically, for these qualities prepare the mind to face death with clarity and peace. To approach death skillfully, one must cultivate practices that align with the teachings, ensuring a transition marked by wisdom and serenity. One of the foundational practices is mindful living, which naturally leads to a mindful death. The Buddha once said, "If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows them like a never-departing shadow." Mindful living means being fully present in each moment, aware of one's thoughts, words, and deeds. This awareness helps us recognize impermanence and fosters a sense of acceptance, allowing us to let go of attachments and approach death with equanimity. Meditation plays a crucial role in preparing for death. Among the many meditation practices in Buddhism, Maranasati, mindfulness of death, is particularly significant. This practice involves reflecting on the inevitability of death, not to create fear, but to deepen one's appreciation for life and cultivate detachment from transient things. The Buddha advised his disciples, "Just as all the great rivers flow to the ocean, so too does life flow toward death. Therefore, be diligent." By meditating on death, one becomes more attuned to the impermanence of all things, reducing the fear and anxiety that often accompany the thought of dying. It fosters an understanding that death is a natural part of existence, no different from the changing of seasons or the rising and setting of the sun. This perspective encourages acceptance, helping individuals meet death with a calm and steady mind. Another key practice is the cultivation of merit. In Buddhist tradition, merit refers to the positive spiritual energy generated through wholesome actions, such as generosity, ethical conduct, and meditation. By accumulating merit, one creates favorable conditions for a peaceful death and a positive rebirth. The Buddha often encouraged acts of generosity, saying, "If people knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given." Merit can also be dedicated to others, a practice known as patidana. By transferring merit to loved ones or all sentient beings, one extends compassion beyond oneself, fostering a sense of interconnectedness and reducing selfish clinging. This act of generosity not only benefits others, but also purifies the mind of the giver, creating a sense of peace and fulfillment. Compassion is another essential quality to develop as one prepares for death. By practicing metta, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion, individuals soften their hearts and reduce fear. The Buddha emphasized the transformative power of compassion, saying, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." A compassionate heart, free from resentment or ill will, is a heart that can let go gracefully at the moment of death. For those accompanying someone nearing the end of life, providing an environment of peace and support is equally important. Chanting Buddhist scriptures, reciting mantras, or simply offering words of comfort can help the dying person focus their mind on wholesome thoughts. The Buddha advised that the final moments are crucial, for the mental state at the time of death strongly influences the nature of rebirth. Another valuable practice is reflecting on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, teachings, and the Sangha, spiritual community. This reflection instills confidence and inspires faith, helping the mind to remain focused and uplifted. The Buddha assured his followers, "Whoever recollects the Buddha with a pure heart finds joy in the present and secures peace in the future." In preparing for death, the ultimate aim is not merely a favorable rebirth, but liberation from the cycle of samsara. The practices of mindfulness, meditation, merit cultivation, and ethical living all work together to weaken the forces of craving and ignorance, paving the way for awakening. The Buddha reminded his disciples, "Be a lamp unto yourselves. Be your own refuge. Seek no other refuge." These words encourage self-reliance and inspire individuals to take full responsibility for their spiritual journey. Death, in the Buddhist view, is not something to be feared or avoided, but a profound opportunity for spiritual growth. By preparing for it skillfully, one not only ensures a peaceful transition, but also moves closer to the ultimate freedom of nirvana. This preparation is a gift not only to oneself but also to others, as it sets an example of how to face life's greatest transition with dignity, wisdom, and compassion. Part 6. Conclusion. The Buddhist perspective on death is neither grim nor escapist. It is a vision rooted in reality, offering profound insights into life's impermanence and interconnectedness. Death is understood as a transformation, a doorway leading to the next stage in the cycle of existence. Through the lens of the Buddha's teachings, this transition becomes not an end, but a natural part of the flow of samsara. Central to this understanding is the law of karma, which highlights the responsibility we have for shaping our lives and future experiences. The Buddha's words remind us, "What we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow." This teaching empowers individuals to live ethically, mindfully, and with compassion, knowing that every action has consequences. The preparation for death begins in life. By embracing mindfulness, cultivating merit, and practicing meditation, we lay the foundation for a peaceful death and a positive rebirth. These practices, deeply rooted in the teachings of the Buddha, serve as tools for overcoming fear and attachment, allowing us to face life's greatest uncertainty with wisdom and courage. Ultimately, the Buddhist teachings on death aim to inspire liberation. While the cycle of samsara continues for most, the path of the Noble Eightfold Path offers a way out. The attainment of nirvana, the cessation of birth, death, and rebirth, is the culmination of the spiritual journey. It is the realization of a state beyond suffering, where the mind is free and the heart rests in the unconditioned peace of truth. The Buddha left us with a timeless reminder: all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. These words encapsulate the essence of the Buddhist approach to death and life, a call to awaken, to live with awareness, and to seek the highest freedom. In understanding death, we find not despair, but the wisdom to live fully and the hope of ultimate liberation.